Bienvenidos a un nuevo capítulo de En Juego, donde no hablamos del juego, sino de lo que está en juego en el negocio del deporte. Feliz año para todo el mundo, 2026, año de mundial. Estamos felices, creemos que Colombia va a hacer una participación histórica. Para todo futbolero, un año de mundial es un año especial. Este año para nosotros va a ser increíble, para nosotros los futboleros. Señor, bienvenido a En Juego.
Bienvenidos, Simon, bienvenidos a todos. Como decía Simón, año de mundial, nada más especial. Llegan las alegrías, un mes de solo fútbol. Pero antes del mundial, pues nada, no queríamos dejarlo sin episodios. Entonces aquí va el primero del año, con un invitado muy especial que lo voy a dejar a que usted lo introduzca.
Me traje al Ronaldinho del negocio del deporte, mi querido amigo Brazuca, Bruno Matos. Voy a hacer un spoiler para todos los oyentes del juego. Bruno hasta apenas está practicando su portuñol, entonces este episodio, para que sea un poquito más fluido, lo vamos a hacer en inglés. Sin embargo, trataremos de poner subtítulos en el episodio por si hay alguien que lo quiera ver con subtítulos. La idea es subirlo pues a todas nuestras plataformas con subtítulos. O sea, a partir de ahora va a empezar a hablar en English y vamos a presentar nuestro invitado. Entonces, sin más preámbulos, my brother, Bruno, welcome back to En Juego.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here again.
So, as I told you guys, Bruno was one of my classmates in the Masters. I'm saying this, but he's one of the most brilliant minds in the business of sports. He's the Ronaldinho Gaucho of the business of sports. He went back to Brazil. Now he's working in Brazil, and he's going to speak about what he's doing right now. So, Bruno, why don't we start with you introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about you and your life within sports?
Perfect. I think just before we get into it, you set the bar too high. You put Ronaldinho's name next to mine. That's already the highest the bar can get. You're wearing a Flamengo jersey. You're speaking some beautiful acknowledgements for me. So let's just step back, put our feet on the ground, and I'll tell you a story about a normal guy who wanted to work in sport, started his career in sport a couple of years ago, started by doing economics at INSPER, graduating there, which is one of the top business schools in Brazil. To get a differential, to get into the sports industry, I started working at Sisu Ventures, which is a big holding group in sports marketing, but they do a little bit of everything, since from hospitality and stadium venue management, operations, to sponsorship, brokerage, up to technology, sports tech like membership association, CRM, marketing for football clubs in Brazil, and all the way to like athlete management, managing their careers and contracts and everything. So I got a lot of experience there. I stayed there for almost 4 years, leading one of the company's business units, and kind of like I went all around, worked with the partners there, and 1 or 2 years ago, I think it's been 2 years now that we went to New York, did the sports business program at NYU, which is where we met, me, Simone, and Lucas. So amazing experience just for that itself. But after I completed my master's degree, I came back to Brazil. I always wanted to come back to Brazil. I didn't know at which point, but I actually happened to come back like straight away from graduation. And back in Brazil, I met an incredible guy who is now my boss, who is called Guilherme Bellintani. He's a super important guy in football in Brazil. He started his own multi-club ownership, which is what we're going to talk a lot about here today, in 2024. And that's where I am today. I won't spoil it yet. We'll get into the details later, but that's where I am today. First Brazil multi-club ownership. We already have 5 clubs in our portfolio. We're looking into expanding. We're doing a lot of great stuff right now. And working in football is great. So we all know that. So let's get into it.
Amazing, Bruno. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. I mean, you just touched on the subject, so we might as well get into it. Please tell us a little bit about this popular term that everyone's using. You can see it everywhere, this multi-club ownership. Why is it becoming so popular in global football? Yeah, tell us a little bit about it.
Perfect. So multi-club ownership, or as you guys may see a lot in articles or mentions, MCO, the popular term, or the easier way to put it, it's basically the simplest thing you can think about. Is basically if one person or entity owns two or more clubs or franchises. It doesn't have to be on football, but it's an enormous phenomenon in football right now. But it could be in various sports. So we see this in America, especially in American market, especially owners having a cross-sport multi-club ownership. So they have a team in basketball, they have a team in baseball, they have a team in hockey, and they have a team in football. And when we say football today, it's not because we're speaking in English, but we're gonna keep saying football for what the Americans call soccer, because it's the real one you play with your feet. So, okay, back to the term. So multi-club ownership is basically when we have this dual or more than two properties under one owner, and it's taking over football for several reasons. First of all, it's football clubs are becoming real, like, interesting assets for investors. We've seen in the past, in the early 2000s, when we had the first big investments into sports with Roman Abramovich in Chelsea, and then a lot of other Premier League clubs, of a big private equity firm getting into PSG, and then a boom into a lot of funds, private equity, asset management funds getting into sports. And since they became this really interesting investment for political reasons, for financial reasons in terms of getting that valuation throughout the years and building that valuation in a specific region or with a specific sport, because the market itself is growing super, super fast. We are seeing those funds and those owners try to get into a network of clubs, a network of franchises, so they can connect the efficiency of the management that they have on a flagship club, for example, and make the best out of smaller satellite clubs for that flagship club to strive, or to make a whole business out of a network of clubs, because being in different regions leverage your position globally, or can help you build a global brand instead of a regional brand, or to connect with different types of fans, different levels of different divisions and different levels of the sport. A lot of things go into it, but basically it's taking over football. We're seeing over 130, I think, multi-club groups in the world right now, just for soccer, specifically football. And most of them still two club owned only under the umbrella, but some of them go up to 13 clubs, like City Football Group, which is maybe the global benchmark for this kind of stuff. So this is kind of like brief introduction, a lot of things to dismember here, but it's kind of like a traditional business holding, but for football clubs.
Amazing, fantastic. And you mentioned City Football Group, and I have a question there, Bruno. We've seen groups like City Football Group, Red Bull, 77 Partners expand very quickly. Yeah, and these are like the most known in the world. But what do you think are the main advantage of owning a network of clubs instead of one? And talking about these big ones, for example, City Football Group, why do they have clubs in Asia, in Europe, in the United States, in Latin America? Like, why they are creating this network?
Okay, so I think the answer to this question is pretty interesting, because there's no one correct answer for two reasons. First, because I think the model itself, it's still being like established. So each MCO is finding its way to what is the right answer to this question. But the second reason, because each MCO, or at least there are a lot of forms for each MCO to try to drive business and to try to drive value on their own way. So not necessarily, and they are a lot different. City Football Group is the same or has the same strategy or reason to be in multiple continents as Red Bull Group. If you look at Red Bull, it's an easier explanation, of course. They're first and foremost a energy drink company rather than a multi-club ownership in soccer and football. So being in different continents, being in different markets, it's basically brand placement, establishing the brand, and being present in different regions throughout the world because their product is global. But if you look at City Football Group, it's a little bit different. It's a lot more focused on the sport itself. It has, it's backed, the investment is backed by a private fund from the UAE. So there's a lot of financial interest there. We have the entire network of clubs built to support Manchester City, which is the big flagship club they have. So, for example, being in Uruguay, which is a small country, but we all know it's World Cup year 2026. Uruguay is always impressive, even having a small population. They produce a lot of players. They're known for being a selling market, so they sell a lot of players internationally. Being in Uruguay, which City Football Group is, maybe could be like a way to find players in Latin America, having their presence there, scouting, gathering intelligence from a continent and specifically a country that produces a lot of players, and then sending that network wide, or at least like step by step, because they also have a club in Brazil, which is also in South America. So they go from Uruguay, they can go to Brazil. They have Bahia in Brazil, which is super interesting because Guilherme Bellintani, who is the owner for where the multi-club I work for, was the president of Bahia for 6 years and did the transaction from Bahia to Manchester City. So that's something we're pretty close to. But they moved from Uruguay to Brazil and maybe Brazil to Europe, and then they get to Manchester, maybe Spain with Girona in Manchester City, and then they get to finally to Manchester City. So maybe producing players, positioning the brand, convincing sponsors, and for example, they just closed recently a Puma deal for the sports materials to provide the sports material for 5 clubs in the network, all at once with a huge, I think it was $800 million in 10 years. So they leverage the smaller clubs that don't have the ability to get a sponsorship deal like this, putting City Football Group, Manchester City into the deal, and selling a City Football Group deal with multiple clubs and leveraging like revenue streams for all the clubs. So there are various reasons. One of them could be player scaling, scouting, understanding different markets, just being present there for the future development of the network, or it could be as commercial as sponsorship deals go. But each multi-club has its reasons. We'll get into Squadra, which is our multi-club, and we have our own reason as well for our strategy and where we're at. But it's super interesting because it's not established yet. There's no right answer. There's just different models out there, and some of them are proving to be more profitable. Some of them are proving to be more interesting to perform better in sport with your flagship club. So it's pretty interesting. We're seeing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we definitely are. And to be honest, it's pretty crazy. I think we can all agree here that football is the most watched sport in the world, and it's not the most profitable one, which is insane. So I feel like a lot of clubs are trying different type of models. And just before we get into Squad, I wanted to ask you, do you believe this MCO is going to be like the next dominant model in the next 10 or 15 years, Bruno?
Yeah, I have two rather strong beliefs, I would say, for the MCO model. The first one, I think we're going to see now we have a lot of MCO groups, as I said, over 130 worldwide. I think we're going to see few of them, the biggest ones, kind of like consolidate and eat up the market and kind of like dominate, and then we're gonna have like a big gap, and we're gonna have a lot of two clubs, multi-clubs, which is kind of like, they're not really multi-clubs, they're just like a pair of clubs. You have a flagship and then you have a secondary club, but they're still called multi-club ownership by definition. But I think we're gonna see this division. We're not gonna see kind of like those intermediary groups with 4 clubs, 3 clubs. We're either gonna see something large movements, 6 plus clubs, or we're either going to see a lot of pairs of clubs, which I think this is the movement that's happening right now, consolidation in the market over the next few years. And the second thing, which is kind of like a doubt, I said it was a belief, but I think it's a doubt, is rather we're going to see the multi-club ownerships keep accepting football as a deficit or a sport that keeps losing money year over year to perform, or if multi-clubs or multi-club owners are going to kind of like turn this around and say, no, we have to be a profitable business. If we have a multi-club, we have to be profitable. And that's, again, we're going to get into Squadra, but that's something we have, like, we're not doing. We won't accept having losses. Our model is all about making profit, as every business should be, in our opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of expectation if MCOs are coming to kind of fix the model, the business model of football. We'll see.
Yeah.
And now I want to talk about Squadra, Bruno. So you said before that you are the first homegrown multi-club ownership in Brazil. And you also said that every MCO has his own vision and its own purpose. So I want to understand first how Squadra was born and what's the vision and what's the purpose of Squadra.
Okay, so I think I already touched on this point a bit. So Guilherme, our owner, he was the president of Bahia, which is a super important and relevant club from the northeastern part of Brazil. And he was the president there for 6 years. And at the end of that time, he was the responsible for the integration of Bahia into City Football Group, which we already talked about a little bit. So he got in touch with the multi-club ownership in first hand and with the biggest entity there is in the world. So after completing the deal, moving Bahia into City Football Group, he decided to start his own. And as he tells, 10 days after he left Bahia's presidency, he put on an offer for Londrina, which is our current flagship club. And 4 to 6 months later, in 2024, they actually got the deal done, and he bought Londrina, the first club. And after he started with the first club, he saw an opportunity with a smaller club in São Paulo, which is called Linense. São Paulo is the biggest state in Brazil in terms of economics. It's a super important state. Linense plays in the second division of the state. So we have state divisions in Brazil, which is pretty important. We're almost a continent of a country. So we have a lot of state championships, and it's super important. And specifically, São Paulo's state championship is super relevant and drives a lot of revenue in the first division. So we saw an opportunity to put a print there, and we have Linense now in our portfolio, and we have 3 clubs, smaller clubs that are kind of like academies. So under 20s, under 17s, spread it out throughout Brazil. And I'll just put the names out there. So it's Ipiranga from Bahia as well, the region Bahia. VF4, which is a project founded by a former player. Pretty interesting project that we assumed all the management and everything we took over with him as a partner still. And Conquista, which is basically a really, really small academy, kind of like a football school academy for young, really, really young kids to start playing it from the region. So that's kind of like how we formed the group and we got to the point where we're at right now. We have these 5 clubs inside of our portfolio and we're looking to expand. We have our next steps planned, but this is basically how it came to be, like our brief history.
Amazing. You mentioned some of the teams that are already part of Squadra, but I want you like to describe like the kind of teams that you're looking for, and based on the vision of Squadra, because this is an opinion from me. It's I think we are in a continent that we produce players, we produce the talents. So I want to understand if Squadra in the future, in I don't know 10, 20 years, wants to compete to City Football Group or wants to be the MCO that produce the best talent to then sell those players to a City Football Group.
Perfect. And also, I forgot to answer this part of the question. So let's get into it. We have our own model of MCO, our own understanding of what our MCO should be. And it's exactly in one of those points that you put out. We are what we call under the radar multi-club ownership. So the types of club we're looking at are clubs that are in good regions, but they are not the biggest clubs in the region. They have a fan base, but it's not the biggest fan base in the region. They have to be solid. They have to be the least relevant possible, but we don't want to deal with Flamengo. We don't want to deal with a Corinthians. We don't want to deal with a giant fan base club type because it's tough. Because we want to do business. Of course, we want to do football, and football is the most important part of business. But we want to do business at the end of the day. So we're looking for medium tier clubs that make our multi-club under the radar, meaning we're not going to be fighting with Manchester City on the field, but we're going to be spread out throughout Brazil. We already are spread throughout Brazil, and in the future, hopefully throughout the world, to not only find the talent, but sell the talent, as you said, to not only Manchester City, but inside Brazil to top tier clubs, or inside South America to other leagues, or to Europe in secondary leagues, or even tertiary leagues, or even Asia, or any leagues in the world, because, and that's where I'm going to get to our thesis, our focus is to find medium players and not the next Hendrik, the next Estevão, the next big thing in South America. We don't depend on finding them, and we're not looking to find them. Of course, if we find a guy like that, amazing. We're going to break the bank. It's going to be beautiful, but it's not Hendrik dependent. Let's put it like that. It's not Neymar dependent. We're looking just to have a lot of volume on medium basic tier players because, as you mentioned, the continent is basically a factory of football players. And Brazil specifically has been and has always been the biggest exporter of football talent in the world. Every year we're number one in numbers of transactions internationally. We're a giant country, as I said, in terms of like extension. So we have a lot of people, we have a lot of talent, and we sell a lot. So why not start a multi-club or group to find players and sell them inside a country like this? But before I pass the ball back to you guys, just to wrap it up, and this is really interesting because most people think like I think you were thinking, but we switched a little bit our model. We're not looking into kind of build the player from scratch. We're not trying to form the player in the academy. We're not trying to get that kid in 14, 15, 16, 17 years old and develop him as a player to later then sell. That would be, if I could put in more like business terms, it would be more of like a VC. You have to bet on a lot of players and it's a lot of startup players and then long-term results for just some of them. So when Guilherme started the group, Squadra, he had that intent to kind of like have the 3 academy clubs that we have, find those talents when they're young, develop those talents, and then spread them across Brazilian teams, European teams, and then maybe sell because we have a little bit of the economic rights of each player formed in our academy. But then the model switched because we found out, and this is, I'm going to quote him because he always says this, and it's super interesting, and I totally agree. We found out that the most valuable thing in football is not the talent, but the minutes on the pitch. And this is a really huge realization, because when you realize that Brazilian clubs are investing like crazy in the youth development, like over $60 million a year, clubs are investing in youth categories to find players, but only the top club that puts the most under 23 player to play, it's only like 10% of the minutes in the whole season. So they don't get to actually play professional football. And they need to play professional football to be professional players and to be sold. So this is a crazy realization and a turn of understanding that builds what we're doing today, which is we don't develop the talent. We find the talent from those good youth categories, from good clubs, from a club like Flamengo, from a club like any other in the first division of Brazil. But he doesn't have a chance to play there. So why not go to Londrina, play second division, get minutes in, and we share the economic rights with the other club. Or even players who are playing for smaller clubs but have once passed in those youth academies. So this is our model now, and that's what we're doing differently from what people normally think of when they think finding talent and selling talent.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense, definitely. At the end of the day, they more than the opportunity, they want to play. They need to be seen. But just kind of diving deep a little bit more into that, Bruno, 2 things. Well, the first one is you kind of already explained how different you guys are from MCO in Europe or North America, just like by looking at that talent, and you explained a little bit of the ICP of the teams that you look for. But this is just like of personal interest. How has been treating with the social part of it? Like how's it been the reaction of the fandom? You know, has it been easy? Has it been hard? Is this something that you guys have to manage a lot? Because I believe for every single fan out of nowhere, an MCO buys their club, it could be either really good or really bad, or I mean, everyone has like this very different opinions. How has that experience been with Squadra?
Yeah, it's like interesting, but at the same time, it's been pretty positive overall. And as I said before, we ultimately want to do business, but business goes through doing soccer or to doing football, or to playing well. Because if we're talking about selling talent, if we're talking about putting young kids on the field to play and finding those guys who really can be sold in the future, we need to play good football. So Londrina has to perform. Linense has to perform. In each club at their level, of course, but they all have to perform at a certain level so that we can drive our business and sell our players and actually generate results long term. And this is the generic answer, but let me put it into like concrete examples of what's happening right now. When Guilherme acquired Londrina, they had just fallen, being relegated to the 3rd division in Brazil. So, of course, as a fan, you'd be devastated. 3rd division, it's a huge dip from the 2nd division. And last year, we got promoted from the 3rd division to the 2nd division. And that's where business and football cross paths. Because, for example, okay, you're going to say, okay, it's an MCO, you guys invested a lot of money, you built a squad because you guys have an owner, and then you reached 2nd division, you got back to 2nd division. No, that's the contradictory part of what we do. We have an excellent football team, football department. So they work, we have like at holding level, at the multi-club level, not at the clubs level. We have a scouting team. We have a technical director. We have a head scout. We have a team that looks into finding those talents, finding those players, building the team, finding who is going to be the manager for each of our teams. So we got promoted to the second division in second place, right, in the table. But we have the 12th biggest salary payment role. So basically, we were a second part of the table in terms of salary. We would be a below average team in the third division, but we were promoted in second place. So basically, we work hard. We have the football department working hard to combine business, which is let's keep the costs low and let's find the talent that we can buy with that cost. But we have to perform because that's really important at the end of the day. Otherwise, if we're talking about football and we don't play good football, it's never going to work. So that's pretty interesting, and it's a real example. And right now, just to get to actually today when I'm talking 2026 January, Londrina is performing really well. We're playing the state championship right now. We're unbeaten. We just qualified to playoff round. We have, of course, our feet on the ground because we have 2 first division teams in our region. It's going to be hard, but we're fighting every game for a good performance in the state championship, and we're playing the second division this year with the same mindset. Keep the costs low, but we hope to perform above average.
Amazing. Congratulations for that. How about making an episode of En Juego with Londrina jersey, Bruno?
Yes, I'll have to do. Maybe I'll bring you guys Londrina's jerseys.
Of course, it would be an honor. But you talk a lot about the business of football, and you talk about costs, you talk about revenue, and I want to understand in general. I know you like this topic about the realities of football, yeah, and why most of the clubs in the world lose money. And from your experience, why it's so difficult for clubs to be financially sustainable, and how is this model changing that?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think, again, let's separate just one thing from another. I don't think the model is necessarily changing that. I think some of the multi clubs are trying to change that, but I think we have a long road to go through before we get to like an actual transformation of the model. I just read an article like 5 minutes before we got in that I think 90% of Premier League clubs are going to report losses this year.
Okay.
Even after the financial reform, even after everything. I just read this article. So 90% of the Premier League clubs are going to report loss. So we still have a long way to go.
But Bruno, I propose you something to keep it like very academic. Let's split it in two because I'm pretty sure you know a lot about this. Let's talk about the revenue stream, and then let's talk about the cost area of the teams. So you can explain to us and to the people of En Juego how this works.
Okay, so let's start by revenue streams. When you look at football club, you have and I'm gonna talk like how we think inside Squadra, and then I'm gonna compare to how it's normally done, because this is important not only for our model but for why the losses come in some cases at least. So we have two types of revenue streams. We always separate the player trading revenue from all other operational revenues. Here is what we do in Squadra. Not every club does this. In Brazil, most of the clubs don't do it. They put player trading as a recurrent revenue, as an operational revenue, like they project it every year inside the operational revenue. But we separate it. So we have player trading. It's a super important revenue, especially for markets like South American market, which is a super selling market. And we have the operational revenues, which are basically match day revenues. What's match day revenues is selling tickets, is what you profit inside the stadium, is all that operation that goes on during the actual game, it's game day itself. You have sponsorships, which is obviously super important, and it's something that keeps a kind of like baseline or not profit, but revenue stream for clubs year after year. We all know the exposition that a football club can provide. We all know how it is when you connect with a football club and it goes right. Né? And we also have like the merchandising, licensing products part of it, which is selling jerseys, selling other types of products with the club's emblem on it, with the club's brand on it. So that's also super important revenue, especially for when you get to the bigger clubs, because they can convert that into like if you're a big club, if you're big enough, let's put it like that, brands will pay to be like, for example, in your jersey, Adidas does Flamengo's jerseys. Adidas pays a huge amount of money for Flamengo so they can be the providers of the Flamengo jerseys. If you're talking about smaller clubs, you kind of have to fight there in the market. So you have to convince a brand to kind of like give you the material you need for your players to play, for your staff to wear year round, and then they will sell the jerseys as well and get the profit, and you'll keep some royalties. So it's kind of like that how it happens. But we also have a lot of different fan engagement revenues as well. It's kind of different throughout the world. In America, it's pretty common to have season tickets. So it's kind of like match day, but it's not, because you buy the entire season at once if you're a fan. In Brazil, it's more of like, in Brazil and South America, it's more of like a membership association program. You kind of like pay monthly to support the club. Sometimes you have discounts on tickets. So I think those are basically the biggest revenue streams we have. In Brazil, there's a movement, I won't get into this a lot, but there's a movement of also, there's a league, a private like club-owned league creation. So we have a lot of revenues that are being distributed there for the collective rights, future revenues that are going to come and things like that. But basically that's it. And if you go to the costs, and that's when it starts to get tricky, main thing, it's always going to be the costs of professional football. So first, athlete salary, and then managers and staff salary, of course. That's going to be a super heavy weight. And that's when it starts to, where we start to see clubs losing themselves and going into performing losses. Why? Because obviously you have to invest in your team so that you can play well, so that you can win, so that you achieve your objective. Because, of course, if you have a club, winning first, then profit later. Most of the time. That's the rule historically. So owners, presidents, especially presidents, because when you're an owner, at least it comes out of your pocket. But when you're a president, not necessarily. So let's focus on presidents. They spend a lot on their rosters because they want to win, and they want to win now, while they are sitting in that chair, and while they can say that they won and not prepare the terrain for the next president or for the next management. So a lot of heavy investment on the roster, a lot of heavy investment on the football part of it, that makes that make or break your profit loss against that revenue. So you kind of like, when you look at your revenue and compare to your costs, how we do it on Squadra and how we think it should be done, you should aim to have those football costs. And this is also something, this is not super innovative or new. Ferran Soriano, which is the CEO of City Football Group, he has this written down in his book. Football should be 70, maybe 80% of the costs for your club. And ideally, that's how we do it on Squadra. We aim to do it on Squadra. It has to be 70 or 80% of your operating revenue. Why? because if you keep it at that level, it's healthy, and the other 20 or 30% you can use for let's put it like the business and the administration team. So the guys that do marketing, legal, operations, the costs for the training center, everyday costs, the stadium, everyday costs, and everything like that for the other 20, 30%. And if you can keep it in that healthy relationship, you break even operationally. And what does that mean? You won't report losses operationally. Why I'm like mentioning operation so much? Because you have to remember we're keeping player trading out of it. And that means if you sell a player and you're breaking even operationally, you're going to perform profit. You're going to report the profit. If you're 0-0, same amount of revenue is the same thing as your costs operationally, and you have player trading outside of this. If you sell a player, you're in profit. And that's what we do in Squadra. In 2026, so this year, Londrina, we're in our budget for 2026, Londrina is actually going to break even operationally after 2 years of our project. And if we sell a player, we're going to perform, we're going to be in the green side of things. So we always think clubs should kind of try to manage those two things. But at the same time, I can speak all this beautiful business strategy thing. If you're a top club in your region, if you're a top club in your nation, if you're a historically big club, demanding fan base, you kind of have to perform loss. Why? Because you have to invest heavy in your athletes and on your roster, because you have to win. Because that's just how it's been, and that's just how it kind of like has to be for big clubs. It's their business is winning and not selling players like our business is. So it's tricky, but it basically works like that. It's a balance, and I gave you kind of like the healthy recipe for it, but it's not easy to perform, especially again if you're a big club fighting at the top of the first division, fighting to win, not to build a business.
Yeah, definitely. Big fandom always has higher demands, right? Very result oriented. So focusing on the process could definitely lower those costs, but it's tough for them. But just one last question regarding Squadra, Bruno. We want to know what you do there. What's your role?
Okay, so perfect. As I mentioned, we have a football department. As much as I think I know about football, it's another level. Those guys there, the guy understands the field, understands the player. They have a different kind of eye for the thing. So I'm not in the football department. I'm in the business side of things. So I work directly with Guilherme on building the strategy for everything we do, validating our financial projections and models, our expectations in terms of the business results, like how we're going to perform, what we're expecting. Also talking to investors, which is a pretty important part of it, because we don't have a infinite amount of bucks to spend in our business. So we have to turn around our financials, as I mentioned about Londrina breaking even, quick. And we have to have money for not only supporting our losses, because only Londrina is going to break even, but we have the other clubs. They are performing a little bit on the loss side of things. So we have to cover our deficit. And we have to look into expansion, of course. Our idea is not to stay only in Brazil. We're looking into different markets. A super key market for the Brazilian market itself is Portugal, because it's the biggest transfer player bridge in the world between Brazil, from Brazil to Portugal, and from Portugal to Brazil. So it's a pretty key market for us. We are looking to, in the future, also, of course, expand our presence in South America itself as well. The Uruguayan market is a pretty interesting market. They're just changing the way they do the media rights, the TV rights there. The market is booming. It's a pretty good moment to look at that market. There are other markets in the European side that are very interesting for international player transfers as well. No limit for international players register and everything. So I basically look into all of that strategy for present and future. talking to ownership and investors and looking into new markets, looking into new acquisitions, looking into our football operations and kind of like assessing the actual football teams administration to perform better in terms of finances, in terms of results, in terms of generating revenue, because at the end of the day, that's super important. So that's kind of like where I'm at right now.
Beautiful, fantastic, Bruno. We're getting to an end of this amazing episode. We've learned a lot.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, we always learn a lot from you, Bruno. So thank you for that. To finish up the episode, we have two very quick questions. Of course, as I mentioned, this is the year of the World Cup. So we want to know your opinion as a guy of football. How do you see Brazil and Colombia prior to the World Cup?
Okay. Personal opinions then.
Yeah,
We're gonna
yeah.
get into a heart-to-heart conversation now. Okay. So let's put it like this. As Brazilians, that 4-year gap between one World Cup and another, it always goes like this. The year after the World Cup that we lose in whatever phase, last time was quarterfinals against Croatia. The year after World Cup, we're like, okay, this is a disaster. We're never going to win a World Cup again. This is the worst Brazil we've ever seen in the history of Brazil. This is not going to work. Second year, normally changes the coach, expectations are back. Then we lose 3 games in a row, and we're like, we're Brazil, we shouldn't be losing. This is not fair. What's happening? We have good players, and they are normally performing well in their European clubs, but not performing well for the national team. And then as we get closer, and now, 2026, as we get closer, we kind of like blind ourselves and think we're amazing. And we're Brazil, and we're the best football club, the football country in the world. And expectations start to get high. We won the party. We want to believe we can do this. Neymar's coming back, He's not injured. He's playing well at Santos. Most of the people are saying it's going to be a disaster. I think it's going to be a disaster. At the bottom of my heart, I don't think we're going to perform well. But in the surface, we
Rationally.
have to... rationally, I think we're not going to perform well.
Exactly,
Unrationally, at the surface.
But then emotionally, yeah.
Exactly. You have to put on that smile and say, we have to try to win this. Hendrick scored a hat-trick this week. Why can't he score a hat-trick in the World Cup? And now going to the Colombian side of things, for you guys, I would be really excited. Like, I think Colombia has been performing this last few years like a top club in the top country in the continent. You're head-to-head with Argentina in one of the best years Argentina has ever seen for their side. So I think Colombia, it's one step ahead or more in terms of when comparing to Brazil. I think you guys have that extra edge right now on top of us, and I would be pretty excited. I would project. I could see Colombia in the Final Four. I don't think that's gonna happen, but I could see Colombia in the Final Four, fighting for the Final Four.
I'll believe you.
I could see that. But I don't think it's gonna happen rationally.
Yeah.
I could see that happening. Like, you never know. The path, more countries this time around. You don't know the path. I don't know the exact paths by heart, so it could happen. Definitely could happen.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely a different World Cup, a lot more matches, one more stage. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I feel like we need a little bit more of that emotional mentality that Brazil has. It's Brazil, It's like the Real Madrid of countries. You can never count them off, and you never want to face them. So yeah, we'll see what happens. And then the last question, Bruno, we asked every single person that we have here in the podcast, because it's always someone out there looking to get into the sports industry from very different paths. So we always ask them, what type of advice would you give to that person that is probably listening to this and being like, all right, what this guy is doing. It's absolutely amazing. I want to be like Bruno. I want to be in the industry. What type of advice would you give that person in order to get into the industry? I know there are very different paths, but what would be your own advice?
Okay, so first thing, I think if you're here listening to En Juego, you're doing your first step is the correct step. You're already on the right path. Continue listening to En Juego. These guys are amazing, and they're doing an excellent job on bringing what's the actual sports business out there, what people are doing, the most interesting sides of the sports industry. And I think listening not only to En Juego, but listening to other podcasts, reading articles, keeping yourself informed on what's happening is super important, because it's a fast-paced and it's transforming like at a really, really intense rate, the industry as a whole. So keep yourself informed. But I think the most important thing is reach out, have conversations with people from inside. It's a really it's a tougher than normal industry to get into, because it's so specific. It's so close to people's hearts, fandom. You're touching with something that moves the world. So try to understand how people from inside of it got there. Talk to people, reach out to Simon, reach out to Lucas, reach out to me. That's a good way to get started. If you don't have anyone to reach out to people you listen to people you read. I think that's the best advice I could give, because conversations at the end of the day were a big part that brought me to where I'm at right now. And I know people who talked to me in the past that I helped or tried to help, at least, that are doing amazing jobs in different parts of the sports industry as well. So networking. At the end of the day, it's gold.
Fantastic, Bruno. There's an advice from a very, very important person in the sports industry, my friend Bruno. Thank you again for coming. We hope we can repeat this episode in a few months, Bruno, and we are pretty sure that Squadra is going to be a very important organization in the world of football. So, muchas gracias, meu amigo.
Muchas gracias a todos que nos escucharon. Portuñol.
Estás practicando tu español, ya veo.
Sí.
Y a todos los oyentes del juego, muchas gracias. Otro episodio, empezamos el 2026 con toda. Un spoiler, ya tenemos más de 8 episodios grabados para este año, más los que vamos a seguir haciendo. Todos los lunes vamos a sacar un episodio nuevo cada semana para que estén pendientes, con gente experta de la industria, con gente muy crack que trabaja en el negocio del deporte. Así que si usted quiere entrar a esta industria, si usted quiere aprender de esta industria, no se pierda los episodios de En Juego, que cada vez sube y sube más el nivel. Nos vemos en un próximo episodio. Chao a todos.